All right, guys. Hey, it's Ted Bogert. We are back with the Ted Show. I'm excited to have this guest on. First of all, he's got three names. I'm fascinated by anybody who puts three names in their moniker. Billy Samoa Saleebey.
Hey, what's
Did I get
going
it
on,
right?
Ted? Thank you
Uh,
for having me. I'm thrilled, and definitely there's a story behind my middle name, and we could get into that.
I want to get into that. I want to get into talking about how we all have the ability to shine. I want to talk about podcasting and your podcast inside out. But before we get into all of that, it's great if people can learn a little bit about you. So give us a little origin story if you don't
Sure.
mind.
Well, my origin story also happens to answer the question as to why my middle name is Samoa. So I was born in American Samoa, and by complete chance, my dad was teaching there, getting his PhD. And I joked that, being the son of hippie parents, they decided to name me Samoa. So why I use it is it's unique. You know, how many people have their middle name Samoa? And so it stands out. It's a bit more memorable. And therefore, I decided to use it and kind
I
of
love it.
from a
You know
branding.
what I thought? The first
What's
thing I
that?
thought of when I heard it was, he's got a cool island vibe. I don't know why I thought that, but Samoa, I
Yeah,
thought, well,
man.
he's got to be relaxed and chill.
Well, I don't know if it's because I was born there, but I have been told that I'm a chill dude, and I every time I hear it, it's music to my ears. I try not to take myself too seriously, and just
Amen to
remember
that.
that is life is short, and just be kind to people and have an easygoing vibe. It's always a best
I love the
possible.
easygoing vibe. So, what did you want to do when you grew up? What did you want to be?
Oh man,
Obviously, probably not podcaster wasn't part of the
yeah,
thought process back in the day. So, what
no.
originally did you want to do?
So I grew up wanting to play baseball. I was an athlete. I played baseball all my life and thought that maybe I could play professional baseball. Well, we all know that many kids dream of playing sports when they're a kid, and very few actually do. So I sort of transitioned and wanted to be in the film business. So that's what I did in my 20s is I made a film, produced, wrote, and directed a feature film called Rolling. And I went to film school. I said I probably should make a film, and that's what I did. And it took 7 years from the time I thought of it to the time it
Wow.
was released and distributed. But an amazing experience and something I wouldn't exchange for anything.
So you went but you obviously decided that wasn't going to be full time either.
Yeah. So when you spend 7 years working on something, you expect 7 years return. And I'll be honest, I didn't get 7 years worth of income. I couldn't start a family on being an independent filmmaker. And yeah, I could make another film, but I felt it was a little too risky to try and make another film at that point in my life. I wanted to start a family, and I found myself in the renewable energy space by complete accident. I started selling solar, and my brother was doing it, and he told me about it. And I just immediately felt that it was something that made sense, right? Put solar on people's roofs, save money, save the planet. And I had some success, and that snowballed into me getting into training. I moved up the ranks at my first company. I left there as the VP of sales, got recruited to go work at Solar City. One thing led to another. I ended up working for Tesla. That's where I was at most
Wow.
recently. So I led all of sales training for Tesla, including energy and vehicle, and a whole bunch of things in between then that really I wouldn't have exchanged for anything. I spent the last 10 years working in corporate, but I didn't feel like it was working in corporate because I got to create experiences. And that's sort of the through line of my life is creating experiences. I love creating something that people will remember and want to tell their friends about. So everything from like when I was in my early 20s making incredibly over the top New Year's Eve parties where I did one on the rooftop of a hotel. I had animatronic ball that would drop. It was a New York theme. I had
Nice.
projections. I did green fur around the pool. It's like a rooftop hotel in Hollywood. So I did green around the pool for Central Park, fake snow at
Nice.
midnight. So just like, just something that people aren't expecting.
I think the creating experiences is so important. It can be applied when people think of it. I think they think of, okay, so what did you do? Did you create a beautiful dinner experience for them, Billy, or did you? But it doesn't have to be about traveling or the big experience. It that can be nailed down or drilled down to customer experiences and things like that. So. Are you in the solar field now?
No,
Yes. Oh,
no,
you're not.
I mean, I have some friends that are doing solar. So if somebody wants to go solar, I can always connect them with somebody that's doing that. I, I loved it. Again, I wouldn't exchange my time in that industry for anything, but to your point, the experience doesn't have to be like an event or a film or a podcast. I love the customer experience and thinking through how to create an incredible customer experience. So working for Tesla, as I'm sure most of your viewers know, it's, the cars are otherworldly. Like they're not your average everyday car. And therefore, when you experience something that has a whoopee cushion as part of the car, a fake whoopee cushion, I could press a button and make my passenger fart. I mean, that's just not normal. And so that's why I come back to this element of surprise. I love when things take you off guard because your brain will recognize when something's different, because the brain is conditioned to kind of forget or not even think about the monotony of everything that you're used to. It only really identifies things that are new and different because it's protecting you. If it's new and different, it might hurt you. And so your brain wants to avoid being hurt. So you pay attention to those things. Well, when you're surprised, it signals this thing in your brain to take note and to pay attention. And so I just love that. So that's part of the reason I love Tesla is, when there's a video game on your console and my 8-year-old can play a video game or we could play chess together, that's a lot more new, exciting, novel, and surprising, frankly, than just getting in a car and going from point A to point B.
Correct. So tell me about the Insight Out. I can't tell you how many times autocorrect really wanted me to put Inside Out.
I've had that.
Inside Out is a podcast. Is your podcast? Obviously, you've got the podcast material. You look good. Talk about Inside Out. How did that come about?
Yeah, man. So when I was at Tesla, one of the most, I would say, insightful moments was when we had a guy named David Rock come to speak. He's a guy he's a researcher who studies the brain, and it studies specifically how the brain interacts with learning is one of the major things that he focuses on. And what he talked about was that when we learn, or when we have insights, is when we learn. And the more I dove in and I read his book, Your Brain at Work, what I realized is that, this part of your brain, the part right behind your forehead, this prefrontal cortex, it's overworked. It gets so much information and it's solving problems constantly. It's not the subconscious, it's the critical thinking part of your brain. And we're feeding it so much data and information, and we expect so much of it, but we really very rarely get to have insights or solve problems because we don't take the time to quiet our mind. And so when we take a walk, when we take a shower, when we're on the toilet, all of a sudden something clicks and we have this new awakening, this new epiphany.
So true.
It's because we have an insight. And so what I wanted to explore with remarkably successful people are what's the moment of insight that changed their life? Because we have those trajectory shifting moments that everything connects and clicks and all of a sudden things change. And when I meet really, really successful people, I always wonder what made them successful. What were those life moments that really changed the course of their life? And so we explore those moments on Inside Out.
I love it. What was yours?
So mine was the experience, making it clear that whatever I do in life, I want to make sure that the experience that people have is one that they walk away with, that they can't soon forget. And so the aha moment for me came when I was training people in the solar space. And so this is 2012. And this is when I first started training people in the solar space. And what I realized is people didn't want to go to boring trainings. They wanted to go to trainings that were fun. And so we started incorporating things like Family Feud, where we would pit one side of the class against the other side, and they'd have to answer questions from what they learned throughout the week. Or we did an American Idol activity where there was a panel of judges. it'd be me, you, and there'd be Paula, right? And one of us would be Randy, one would be Simon. And this is back in the day, American Idol. And we would give feedback on the customer interaction. And so what I realized back then in the aha moment is that anything that I do, I have an opportunity to wow people and surprise people. And I carried that through with everything that I've done since. I at Solar City, I came aboard to lead their internal communications. And so rather than just figuring out, maybe there's an app or maybe there's some other way to communicate, we created Solar City Television, which was a broadcast TV show that went out to the entire organization. 16,000 people got to see on a weekly basis. And it was like the real deal. It was like an ESPN show. We had a $250,000 studio, the whole works. And everybody loved it because it was a way for us to get information, but it was also entertaining. And so the blend of entertainment and education is where my trajectory shifted, because I was able to blend those creative pursuits that I had growing up and that I explored in my 20s when I made my movie, but then also the learning and development side of things that I learned in corporate life. And so blending those two is kind of what I'm doing now with Insight Media.
What are you seeing as when somebody comes to you and says, I'd really like your help, Billy. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things they're coming to you, the general kinds of things? So I think there's a lot of business owners, executives that are really trying to figure out how to capitalize on what's happened, make it a positive, COVID, I mean. And they're really thinking about or rethinking or reevaluating where they want to be and how they're going to get there. So what are some of the common things you see when people come in to you and some of the first steps they take?
Yeah, no, great question. So there's a few things. First and foremost, it depends on the genesis of their question. Are they, as you said, is it a business owner? Is it somebody trying to build a brand? Is it somebody trying to start a podcast? And so there's sort of three different buckets that I work in. One is the training and learning and development space, leadership development space. One is brand awareness through platforms like LinkedIn, and the other is starting a podcast. And so, just to be succinct here, what I will say is one of the common things that I see is people avoiding or being afraid to let their superpowers shine through. And this is where this whole concept of shine came about. Is I believe we all have something special. We all have that it factor. Some are really good at letting it shine through while others aren't. And so what I try to do and what I focus on with my clients is really unpacking why they have a hesitation to let their shine come out. And it could be a business. It could be a person starting in LinkedIn. And so I think it really transcends all of those different buckets that I work in. Great. But what generally is the reason is fear. And again, this comes back to our brain protecting us. We are hardwired to avoid doing something that's going to put us in a risky position and something that's going to maybe hurt us in some way. And the hurt could come from being judged. The hurt could come from being made fun of, or people saying that you're stupid or why are you doing this? Or it could come from just the fact that they themselves have a fear of doing something that's uncomfortable. And a lot of times we avoid doing something that's uncomfortable, and therefore we avoid allowing ourselves to shine through. And so uncovering what it is we're great at is part of it. But probably even more important is once we know what we're great at, we got to let our guard down and we got to overwrite what is really hardwired into our brain, which is to protect us. And we override that and write it both by reprogramming our brain to not allow those things to slow us down and not allowing those things to dictate how we approach what we're doing.
I think the fear is that's definitely top. We were talking about it on another show recently, analysis paralysis. So you allow that, you've got the fear, and then you're maybe getting past the fear, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, I have to know everything. It's got to be the perfect scenario. Everything's got to be absolutely perfect, or I'm not going to, oh, wait, there's a new study that came out. Hold on. So there's a lot of hesitancy because people are utilizing that to just stay stuck. Stuck is easier because it's comfortable over taking the leap. And
So true.
I feel like the fear part is 100% right. Otherwise, everybody would be out there being an entrepreneur. Everybody would be promoted all the time. Everybody would be successful because the fear, I think, is the number one thing. You're right, that holds people back.
You're right. And the paralysis analysis often stems from many times we have high expectations of ourselves. So high, in fact, that we are our own worst critic. We become so inner critical of ourselves that we start to manufacture and artificially put roadblocks in front of us and say, we can't do it because of this, and we can't do it because of that, and we can't do it. And the analysis paralysis a lot of times stems from, I battle with perfectionism, for example, and not everyone's perfectionist, but maybe it's something in that realm. We want something to be perfect. And one of the workarounds I've found to be really, really helpful is this idea of thinking in versions. When we think in versions, we're allowing ourselves to be okay with putting something out that isn't perfect. It doesn't have to be version 10. You put out a version 1, that's great. That is a version. That doesn't mean you can't continue to improve upon that. If you put out a version 1, guess what? You get feedback. You get to understand what worked, what didn't work, and the next version you make will be that much better as a result. But if you just hold everything in and you don't put it out into the universe, you're not allowing it to take shape organically and to start to live a life that will ultimately be better because it's iterated on and it's improved upon through multiple versions.
I love that thought process. So you're almost tricking the mind for you're creating that thing where, okay, it's okay to put out version 1. You'll be able to improve on it later. And I believe that you kind of have to do that with your brain. You have to convince yourself that it's okay to put that out. Perfectionism is what I think a lot of entrepreneurial spirited type people are. They have this perfection. Everything's got to be perfect. It's got to be
Totally.
100% right. And one of the things that I see a lot with people who come to me is about video. They're very fearful of video. They want the lighting to be 100% perfect. Their makeup has to be done. The outfit has to be right. And they spend so much time on that the opportunity for a particular message passes, or they haven't put anything together and they're still in the process of it. I think a lot of people get stuck in the process because it's an easy place to be.
Oh man, you got me it's completely on board with that. I think if you ask me on LinkedIn, that if somebody is apprehensive about making video, and they are, it's usually for the reasons that you just outlined, and also just fear of putting themselves out there. People are afraid to be vulnerable, to be themselves, but in reality, that's what works the best. You gotta show your heart, show who you are. People connect with that. Now, that doesn't mean that you only have to tell like sappy personal stories that show your vulnerability. Like, there's only so far that can go. But if you tell a personal story and you do it in a engaging and a organic, natural way, and you have a point of view where you also offer some advice, you offer maybe a skill or a tactic or something that will allow the audience and the viewer to gain something, then you're getting the best of both worlds. You're showing yourself and you're providing something of value, because we do live in an age where there's so much noise. There's so much just content out there. How do you separate yourself? Well, you separate yourself by being you. That's the number one. You got to be you. So only you can make a video because it's you. And that's great. So if you're going to do that, don't just make a video that just gives advice, but also don't make a video that's just you. Blend those two together and create something that shows who you are, while also imparts wisdom, imparts an insight or advice, or even some tactical tips to help whoever's watching be better than they were before they watched it.
I think that people get caught up on that last part. I think that they really do not know how to look for how to make it better the next time, because they're too caught up in making it perfect the first time. So they don't allow themselves. Yeah. I mean, this is a long process. Because of COVID, obviously, I'm in my bedroom these are not pretend banners back here, but they're banners, and my bed's behind that. I've got a light over here that I would have never used a light before. But you figure this stuff out. But did I do on my? If you look at my first show ever, oh my God, I'm looking all over the place. I haven't looked at the camera. I'm not making eye contact with the guest. I'm fidgeting. I mean, but how else would I have learned what to do better if I hadn't put that one out? And I think people get super caught up in that. What about the shine part? Because I think a lot of people, this kind of goes back to the worth part. I think people don't feel like they're worthy enough to shine, that what they have to say is not shineable or shine worthy. We'll come up with some sort of term. What do you say to those people?
Well, look, I think the first and foremost is it's natural. Everybody, not everybody, but I'd say a good majority of people, they are their own worst enemy and their own worst inner critic. And so I think we have to do together, as I work with clients and as they work on their own, is start to recognize those triggers that their mind are telling them why they can't do something or why they're not shineable. But remember that is conditioning, that's programming that's pre-existed prior to, them even being alive. But now that they're alive and they themselves have the programming that's passed on, they have to think of ways to override that. And so for me, like I do firmly believe that each individual has something that they can offer the world. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, that superpower it is their it factor. And so one of the things that I always like to remind people is you're going to have weaknesses. In corporate life, we call them areas of opportunity, right? You're going to have those. That's okay. But when you recognize your strengths, those are what you double down on. Double downing on your strengths is so key to being able to really harness that superpower. If it's a strength, it could probably become a superpower. And it becomes that superpower when you work on it, what I'll call uncompromisingly and relentlessly working on your strengths. When you've worked on them enough, it's like going to the gym, right? It's compound interest. The more you do it, the better you get. And here's the key part, Ted. The key part is that when you get really good at your superpower, you build confidence. Confidence is one of the most important elements of success, because when you see somebody's confident, you want to follow them. You want to be next to them. You want to be around them. And it's the confidence that creates the glow, that creates the excitement, that creates the shine. When somebody's confident in themselves and their ability in whatever it may be, could be piano, could be singing, could be speaking, could be anything, could be hosting. When they're great at it and they're confident, they shine. And so when you meet people in life, they walk into a room and they shine, it's because of their confidence. When somebody doesn't have confidence, they don't typically shine. And so a lot of what I work on and what I help people realize is that when they find their awesome it factor thing, it's awesome as it is, but it's even better when they embellish it, when they work on it, and they realize how awesome it is. And the more they realize that, the more that confidence will shine through.
I totally agree. The confidence, if you guys have ever been to, in the old days when we did networking events, at a networking event, I could always sense who the confident person was in the room. You could feel it. There's something palpable about that, or maybe it is the shine. There's something that emanates from that person, and people want to be around that. And so I think that's right. I think everybody has that, but then you just have to figure out what it is, and then double down on the strengths. All right. If somebody wants to listen to the podcast, reach out to you, engage you for some consulting, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the way I love to meet people is through LinkedIn. So send me a connection request. I'm probably the only person who's got Billy Samoa in their name, so mine will pop up. But yeah, I mean, I have a website for the show. It's insideoutshow.com. You can find Inside Out everywhere, Apple, Spotify, etc. And then my personal website is just my first and middle name, billysamoa.com. So yeah, I mean, I love meeting people. And the best way for me to meet people is to start a conversation through messaging on LinkedIn, which oftentimes leads into having conversations. Like I just had 2 Zoom calls with people that I met on LinkedIn, and I just I'm a lover of people. And the more I could interact and engage and get to know people and understand their story, the more I'm hopefully able to help in any way that I can. And, look, life is short. So we are who we surround ourselves with. And I'm looking to surround myself with positive, uplifting people that are doing things to make their mark on this world. And if that's you, I want to talk to you.
See, folks, that's the way to wrap it up. That's awesome. All right, Billy, thank you so much. That was very insightful, and I think I got a lot of nuggets out of it as well. So thank you for sharing your journey on the show. That was amazing. You guys reach out to Billy. He's obviously an open book and accessible, and LinkedIn is definitely a place. If you haven't started there, you should begin your journey on LinkedIn, because there's so much opportunity out there. Thanks so much for being on the show,
Ted.
Billy.
It's been a pleasure, man. Fun connecting with you, man.
Appreciate you. All
Thanks,
right, guys,
man.
we're out. We'll see you back tomorrow. Reach out to Billy Samoa Saleebey.
It's a tough one. I know.
It's a tough one. All right, guys. Have a
care.
great one. Thank you. Thanks,
Take care.
Billy, so much.
Thanks, Ted. You
See
got it.